Today kicks off the first webinar of our 4-part series focused on end of year giving. So this session is all about getting ready for the end of year fundraising and campaign season. So for those of you curious about the other webinars in this 4-part series, we have Getting Ready, which is today. So that's going to focus on preparing for your end of year fundraising campaigns. Then we have email marketing coming up. So this is going to involve building out your campaign email marketing with best practices in mind. So we'll look at some content ideas. Then we'll do fundraising outside of Keela. So this looks at how to make sure you get any external fundraising logged into Keela, so all of your transactions, reporting, and receipts are in one place. And lastly, we'll do receipting, which will walk you through preparing to issue receipts at the end of the year. This is a big one for a lot of our Keelaers. So if you are hesitant about receipting or you're not sure the best place to start, we're going to take care of you there as well. By the way, as I go through this, I tend to start to talk fast when I get passionate. I promise I'm not trying to rush. I'm just excited. So I'll rely on my teammates to chat me if I talk a little too fast, but feel free to let me know as well. But I'll do my best to calm down. Okay, so let's get started. So for this session, as I said, we're focused on getting ready for end of year fundraising. The goal of this session is to have you equipped with the knowledge, tools, best practices to really kickstart your giving season. So today we're going to walk through setting fundraising goals and making sure you coordinate all the moving parts that go into launching a fundraising campaign. We're also going to look.
Maggie, I'm so sorry. I'm just
Yeah.
going to jump in. I have forgotten to record this webinar.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I'm just going to ask you if you could quickly just press the record button.
No problem.
And then I'll disappear into the background.
Okay.
So it should be down next to share screen.
Yeah, let's see.
I'm so sorry. Oh, it is recording.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't have, yeah, I can't see the.
It is absolutely recording. I can see it. You know what? As you were.
Thanks, Els. Okay. I'm glad you're paying attention though. This is good. All right. So yeah, campaign inspiration. We're going to be looking at some ideas for those of you who need to sort of get your creativity going. Then the third point, we're going to look at building out your email marketing segments for your campaign and some best practices around segmenting your donor base. Then we'll look at creating your end of year campaign in Keela. So we're going to be diving in app. We'll also look at optimizing your donation form to entice your end of year givers. And we'll also look at tracking your campaign success in Keela. So there's a lot we're going to look at. I'm going to try to move through it all, hopefully. And so you'll be in good shape. As I run through today's session, keep in mind our team can actually work with you and your team one-on-one to prepare for end of year campaigning through our premium care services. So as I go through, think about if these steps are steps you'd like us to build out with you, and we'll send out some information on premium care following the session. Okay, so end of year fundraising, where do we start? The first component of your end of year campaign strategy or fundraising strategy is to determine the purpose behind your fundraising. So it's important to be able to put this into words as it's something that needs to be communicated to donors. So purpose is the big why behind what you're doing. Keep in mind that your purpose is larger than your fundraising goal. So some questions to consider here. What are you hoping to achieve through your fundraising efforts? So think about what impact are you trying to create? Next, think about why you need to meet your funding goal to carry out your purpose. So here's where we're thinking about necessity. Why is it necessary to get this funding for you and your beneficiaries? And lastly, what will happen if you don't realize this purpose? The idea here is to think about the urgency in your funding. Now, I'm saying words like necessity and urgency because these are words that incite action. So it's a need to do something or something bad will happen. Now, you don't have to be obvious about inciting fear and urgency. We don't want to turn people away, but this type of undertone can definitely be built into the language of your campaign and publicized with your campaign. So for example, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, the purpose of our end of year fundraising efforts is to ensure our ability to meet the critical needs of your youth community every single day, one meal at a time. Without your support, you put your community at high risk of hunger and malnutrition. Support us in supporting your community. Everyone deserves a full belly on the holidays. So here you can see the balance of purpose, right? Purpose is clear. We see the necessity, we see why it's important, and we understand the urgency. We're talking about meals here. but it also has that lightheartedness. So, for example, our ability to meet critical needs of your youth community, that's our purpose. Your youth community at high risk of hunger and malnutrition, that's our urgency and necessity. And everyone deserves a full belly. That's that how it lightens it a little bit by creating a point of connection and relatability, like with the holidays and things like that. So now that we have our purpose, the next step is to figure out what our fundraising goal is. This is the funding goal that will support us in achieving this purpose. Okay, so think of your goal as how much you need to raise or how much you want to raise. The most important thing here is that your goal is SMART, as I say with those letters. So think your goal is specific, so it's narrow and it's actionable. It's measurable, so it's something that you can track. It's attainable, meaning it's possible to achieve. It's relevant, meaning it fits into your purpose and your mission. It's time-based, so it has a deadline. And it's team-based, so you make sure your team has the capacity to reach these goals. That's what makes a SMART goal. Now, to establish your end of year fundraising goal, it helps to first consider how close you are to meeting your annual fundraising goal. So this way, you know how much you should aim for at the end of the year to hit that overarching annual funding target. Now, you might already have an annual funding goal in mind, and you may have even already entered it into Keela. If so, you're ahead of the game. For those of you who haven't yet determined a goal, think of the annual funding goal, so throughout the year that you need, that would ensure your programs and projects are supported and that you have at least broken even with your expenses for the year, so you don't have a deficit carried over into the new year. So let's take a look at how Keela can actually help us figure this out, how much we need to raise at the end of the year to meet our annual goal. So I'll go ahead and open Keela here for a minute, and I'm going to jump into our fundraising tool. Now, under the summary tab, we have a section called donation goals. We also have revenue goals, which can be helpful if you're like a revenue focused organization. But for the sake of donations and fundraising, we'll stick with this one. You might already have some stuff entered in here. Some of the other users on the account might have played around, but you might want to revisit it. So if we go ahead and add goals, I have determined as my organization that we need to raise $30,000 for the year. Now I could stick with that and just have a yearly goal, or you can add quarterly and monthly as well. Something like monthly might not be as relevant, or quarterly if you know at the end of the year you pull in 50% of your funding, right? But those options are available for you as well. But I'll stick with yearly for the context of this webinar. Okay, so I can see out of $30,000, which is our target, we raised 23,710, which means I'm about 6,300 away from meeting our annual goal. So that's not too bad. I think we can hit that. And I might even round that up and say our organization is going to aim for 6,500 for our end of year campaigning. Now, if you're really far from hitting your target, don't panic. That's what this whole series is for. We're going to help you get there. And if you've exceeded your goal already, first of all, hats off to you, but don't stop there. Maybe you can expand existing programs' reach with more funding, or even know to set more lofty goals for the next year. All right, so we have our goal. What's next? Now that we have our purpose and goal, it might be a good time to think about your campaign theme. So to get our creativity going, let's run through a few ideas for end of year campaigns for those of you who haven't yet determined a theme. So the first one is Giving Tuesday. So we all know this one. This is the day for celebrating generosity. So Giving Tuesday revenue actually in the US reached record highs in 2021. In just 24 hours, donors gave almost $3 billion last year. So you would think even like with the pandemic and all the things happening with that, but we actually hit a record in 2021, and hopefully that continues to go up. So people are feeling generous out there. Another one is an annual goal campaign. So this is a rush to meet your annual funding goal, which we kind of touched on a little bit earlier. That's another thing you can push and campaign for. Another one is a recurring campaign. So this provides an opportunity to donors to kind of go into the new year as frequent donors. Giving season is actually a great time to secure recurring donors while people are feeling pretty generous, right? Like I might get a little ambitious and sign up for something during the holidays that is going to carry forth into the next year. Another one you can think about it as a story campaign. So there's definitely storytelling built into almost every campaign approach. That's how nonprofits generally campaign. But you can also spotlight particular beneficiary stories to like enhance that intimacy of donors' donations and kind of pull their heartstrings a little bit there. Another one is holiday giving, super simple. You can keep it just pretty general by wishing happy holidays to like your existing donors and asking for a special holiday ask. Another one we see at the end of the year sometimes is impact reporting. So this is where you can kind of share your success for the year and make an ask with the intention that you want to continue that amazing impact that you saw last year and you need donor support to be able to do that. Another one is Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve drive. So there's really nothing like a mad rush to the finish. So this is about encouraging donors to meet a goal within a very specific time frame, right? Like a 48-hour drive, like to Christmas, like once the clock hits 12. So you can make this kind of fun and engaging. This really encourages people to share it with their network at like rapid fire when people feel like they're under pressure. And if you want to take this even a step further, you could combine this with something like peer-to-peer with the peer-to-peer tool in Keela to help kind of take off that cascading effect. And the last one I thought was super interesting, a give up campaign. So I came across this one, and this is a campaign where you encourage people to kick a bad habit. And then they'll donate what they would have spent on that bad habit to your organization. So, for example, if you're someone who gets coffee from a cafe every morning or Starbucks, but you could actually just take that coffee from home, then what they do is donate their cafe money over the course of that 2 months, 3 months, or whatever to your organization. Okay, so those are some ideas. Let's assume you chose your campaign theme. What do we do next? So up next is channels. This is where you want to think about which channels you are marketing your campaign with. More channels means more outreach opportunities. Here are a few examples. You have email, of course, we all know and love that one. Direct mail, so that's like physical mail. Your website, of course. Social media, which by the way includes direct messaging or DMs, as the youngsters call it, including myself. I'm still a youngster. And also comments on social media can be really helpful to engage people. Another one is TV and radio ads. That one's a little bit more traditional in the sense of advertising, but could still work depending on who your demographic is that you're reaching out to. There's also print materials, so posters, flyers, brochures, banners that can be on your website or can be outside somewhere. And of course, word of mouth is always a great one. So we're going to dive into the actual content creation for your campaign in the future webinars when we look at like email marketing in October. But for this episode, we're going to stay a little bit strategy focused when it comes to channels. So once you have an idea of your channels, you can start segmenting your database. So in the case of Keela, segments are going to be the most relevant to email marketing and direct mail because those are the tools that are built into the app, as most of you know. So when we think about segmenting, here's some brainstorming we can do. Okay, so when thinking about reaching out to your donors, segmenting requires considering the target audience or target audiences that you want to reach out to. Now, you might consider reaching out to all of your contacts in one big push, which is actually not so uncommon for small nonprofits. We have limited capacity. Sometimes we don't have a lot of contacts to start breaking into different categories, right? But I want you to maybe start to consider rethinking that because it can have a really, really positive effect on donor behavior. You're likely to experience higher conversion rates if you start to segment your audience based on common characteristics that they share and send personalized outreach. It's likely that your donors have different cause area interests, they have different giving amounts, giving frequencies, relationship lengths with your organization, and so on. So you can use these differentiators to start segmenting. So where do I start? Let's take a look at some examples of criteria that we can use to segment our donor base. So one of the main categories that people use to segment that I see is giving frequency. So this is looking at people who are like one-time donors or first-time donors versus people who have been donating for 5 to 10 years. The idea is we're likely going to want to reach out differently to a one-time donor than someone who's been donating for 10 years. I personally would want to be reached out a little extra special if I was donating for 10 years. Another one is giving amounts. So this is looking at people who donate between $1 and $100 up to somebody who's given up to $5,000 in the past. And then we can even look at things like contact information. So what age are we reaching out to? Or we can look at impact area interest. We can look at campaign interest, geographic location. For example, with geographic location, you could say like, hey, Vancouver friends, right? And send them something like, how do they know which city I'm in, right? And you can also look at relationship length with somebody as well. So another example would be with age. So we might want to reach out differently to Gen Zers who pretty much live their entire existence on TikTok than a more elderly person who might prefer direct mail or physical mail. They get excited when something comes in the mail. Although I have seen some 80-year-olds on TikTok and their content is pretty spectacular, but you see where I'm going with this. So I don't want segmenting to overwhelm you, especially if you usually send your content out in that one big push to your entire donor base. My recommendation is if you have a smaller team in capacity, which is the reality for most of us who work in small to medium sized nonprofits, try to stick to maybe 2 segments to start or 3 segments if you're feeling ambitious. However, if you have a larger team, sky's really the limit. The key is just make sure you can keep up with your outreach to each segment and be careful not to stretch yourself too thin. Okay, but I would definitely recommend this. I think segmenting is awesome. I've seen it have some like pretty fantastic results. So maybe put yourself up to the challenge if you feel like you have the capacity for it. All right, so that brings us to the last step of your year-end fundraising strategy, which is to organize your tasks, okay? No project can be complete without a list of tasks. Well, it can. It's just like that's a very specific type of brain who can be successful with that. All right, so what you're going to think about as you're getting prepared is the tasks required to build out your campaign or campaigns, to maintain them and to measure them. Think about what's involved in each task. Think about who is responsible for each task and a timeline for each task. This is another way to make sure that you have the capacity to launch the type of campaign that you're hoping for. You might find out that, oh my gosh, this is a crazy amount of tasks. There's no way we're going to be able to achieve this. Let's cut back. Or you might look at it and be like, oh, this doesn't look that hard. Maybe we can launch, a holiday campaign alongside a recurring campaign as well. So as you come up with your tasks, these can actually be entered into Keela, and Keela can track them for you. You can assign users to each task, set priorities, group message and tasks, and even change the status of tasks so everybody kind of knows where you're at with your end of year fundraising. So I'm going to be able to show you that tool, which is our projects tool, in a minute. Okay, so enough of these slides. Let's jump into Keela. We're going to explore the projects tool, like I said. We're going to build out a campaign. We're going to build out some segments, and we're going to run through donation form optimization. And then one of my favorite things, we're going to touch on how to track fundraising success, because how do you know you're successful if you're not tracking it? So I'm going to go ahead and open up Keela here and head back to our dashboard. Okay, so first thing I want to show you is the projects tool. Some of you might have seen this before and even use it. Some people might have just always seen that on the sidebar, but never really dug into it. So what I'm going to do is create a project. Okay, and I'm going to name my project. I'm going to go with the Give Up campaign because I think it's interesting and creative. You can add a description for your project if you want. That's for internal purposes. You can add a due date, which again, a SMART goal means one with a timeline or deadline. And I know that I want to make sure we have all our end of year funding in by the 31st. You can set a priority. So I'd say for this project, it's probably pretty high because, as you know, campaign preparation can take time. So we want to get moving as fast as possible. And then you can add members who are other users on your Keela account to this project as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click create. So we've created our project, but we don't have any tasks yet. So I'm going to go ahead and press add task. And one of the first things I know we need to do is create the campaign in Keela. It'd be great if I could spell today. Elsie, you're not alone. Okay. And then you can write a description of that particular task for your team, right? So if you're the person who's doing the admin and adding the task, it might help to add a little description here. You can add a due date. So this is one of the first things we need to do. So maybe I want to say by, mid-October. You can even add notifications. You can set a priority as an option. You can assign somebody to the task, and you can also add followers. So followers are going to be able to sort of watch the task. So I'm going to go ahead and press save. So we've created it. And then once I do that, it opens the task profile. And this is where you'd be able to see like the description, priority. You can actually write like live messages to each other from different users of the account, or like, update on the status as we would comment and be like, working on this, get to this next week. You know how that is. Some actions here: you can edit, you can upload files, duplicate it, move to a project, and you can change the status. So I could mark this as complete. So for example, if I go back to all tasks, we only have one, but you ideally see a list here once you add enough of them. And then if I said, okay, I've created my campaign in Keela, so I'm going to mark this as complete. You can see the status changes here, but if I go back, it also has a bright green check mark there. So this is a really awesome way. Add your tasks in here, keep track of them. It's really going to keep your team organized. All right, so now the fun part, let's create a campaign. So I'm going to jump into campaigns here, and I'm going to go ahead and click create a campaign. And I'm going to name it Give Up With Us, which this will make more sense a little bit later where this kind of name came from. But I'm going to do the idea of like you give up something and donate what you would have spent on that to the organization. And maybe the description again is internal, so I'm going to keep it simple: to meet our end of year fundraising goal. And then campaign fundraising goal. So remember, we determined this earlier. It's how much more do we need to get to our annual fundraising goal? So for me, that's going to be around 6,500. And then I can add other followers to the campaign. So other users on the account I want to be involved. And I'm going to go ahead and press save. So now we have our campaign here, and this is where we're going to be able to see any updates related to this campaign. We're going to be able to track our progress. We're going to be able to see new transactions. The other great part about creating a campaign, which some of you may already know, is the toolbar across the top here. You're going to be able to track any email marketing you sent out related to this campaign, any forms connected to this campaign, transactions coming through, volunteering activity you associate, as well as receipts and letters. So receipts and letters, I definitely recommend this, especially if you're launching kind of a themed campaign. It can be really cool if you customize your acknowledgement letters. So those letters that get sent out when somebody donates, you can kind of shape it around the campaign that you're creating, so it'll feel just a little bit more themed and personalized. Okay, so we've created our campaign. Eventually, we're going to come back to this, but the purpose is to just start by creating it. Then the next step is to think about your segments, okay? And you're going to want to start building those out, start playing around. Now, the reason we would think about creating segments now is because sometimes they can take time. You might want to play around with different criteria to come up with different target audiences. That way, you know exactly who you're trying to reach out to by the time you start building out your email marketing, because your content is going to be based on your segments. So that's why I put segments into the preparation rather than in when you're developing email marketing, because this is kind of the first step. So I'm going to head to contacts, and I'm going to jump into segments, and I'm going to create a new segment. Now, I'm going to keep it really, really simple for now. I could get more complex if I wanted to. You can get more complex if you wanted to, but just for the sake of the webinar, so we can kind of just process the ideas first. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new segment. Now, let's say I decide I want to reach out to 2 different target audiences. I'm a really small organization. That's kind of all I really have the capacity for. So I'm going to reach out to people who haven't donated before at all, and I'm going to reach out to people who have donated in the past. So I'm going to first start out with people who have donated. So now I'm going to go ahead and choose my filters. Now, what I'm going to be looking at is breaking down a list based on donation transactions. More specifically, with donation transactions, I'm looking at frequency, so how often they donated. So what I'm going to do is look for contacts where the frequency is filled. What that means is that for this contact, the frequency of donation transactions has something in it, right? So it is filled, they have donated. So I'm going to go ahead and press save. And I'm going to hover over filters and just make sure I save my filters to my segment. Anytime you add new filters, you're going to want to make sure to click on this button, save filters to segment. Okay, great, perfect, ready to go. Now I'm going to go back to segments, and I'm going to create my second segment. So these are people who have not donated. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose my filters. Again, we're going to be looking at donation transactions based on the frequency. This time we're going to do is empty, meaning that their donation transactions for that particular contact, the frequency is empty. They have not donated. So I'm going to go ahead and press save. And I'm going to, again, save my filters to my segment. So I know that was pretty simple, but you can start to see it's not really that hard to create segments. And now I have two different people I can reach out to. My language for the people who have not donated, I'm probably going to be focused a little bit more on educating them about my organization, trying to understand why they made it into our database in the first place, telling them that about our mission, about our impact we create, because right now you have to build an initial relationship with people who haven't donated at all to even encourage them to start. Versus somebody who has donated in the past, the language might be around, here's what we've been able to do over the last few years or the last year based on your donation. We would absolutely love your continued support. It's been monumental in the impact we've been able to create. So you can see how just that language change can make a really, really big difference. And it's just a subtle change with one filter. So that would be my recommendation is to explore that. Okay, so up next is optimizing your donation form for your campaign. So you can use a general donation form your campaign, but it's probably a great idea to create a new donation form for your campaign. And the reason why is because then you can get really specific and creative about the language that you're using on for your campaign, and it sets it apart from your other donation page. It's like, okay, this organization is doing something cool. They're doing something different. This language is different. This approach is different. This is exciting, right? So let them feel like it's different with you. Another thing that really helps is when you create a new form for a campaign, you can add a progress bar on that campaign as well. So people can see how far away you are from meeting your campaign goal. So my recommendation would be create a new form. Luckily, it's pretty easy to do in Keela, especially if you like being creative the way that I do. I could make forms all day, but yeah, so consider that. So when you're creating a form under create new, we recommend the new form builder. That's our newest form builder. We have the original for those who still have some like the older forms, but definitely the new form builder if you're creating a new form. We're definitely going to be creating a donation form, right? Not a subscription form. And then we have some different options. We have pop-up, embed, and standalone. So you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm running a campaign. Which one do I use? They all sound great. Help. All right. So what pop-up is going to do is that's like a little button on your website that if someone clicks, it's going to pop up a donation form that someone can fill out pretty quickly. Then you have an embed form, which I think a lot of us are familiar with, which is actually embedding it into your website. And then you have standalone. So this is great for if you want to add like a button somewhere, or if you want to share the form's public link in a bunch of different places and lead people back to your form. So what I would recommend is probably for a campaign specifically is embed or standalone. Embed would work for a campaign if you have a page on your website dedicated to that campaign where you can put that information about the purpose of your campaign, what it's all about, where the money is going, things like that. An embed form can be helpful, but a standalone is also great. Especially if you want to like be kind of sharing your links everywhere and you want someone to kind of just be directed to this one URL where all the information's there, the form is there, so on and so forth. So both embed and standalone would work. Embed might involve a little bit more like, your website technician time. So maybe to save yourself time, a standalone might be kind of your best bet for a campaign, but it's totally up to you. All right, so let's say we pick a standalone form, then you can choose your layout, whether you want a multi-page layout or you want a one-page layout. I really love multi-page layouts, especially if you feel like you're going to add a little bit more information about campaigns, then at least it takes someone from page to page rather than having all the options on one. Whereas one-page layouts are awesome for like a little bit more simple forms where you're not adding a lot of additional information, or it makes sense on your website to have all of that information displayed at once. But for campaigns, multi-page can be a great option. And then of course you enter your form details. The most important thing on this page is that when you're creating your form, okay, I'll just do this. Wow. Okay. is, I already made one, but what you want to do is make sure that you choose your campaign. Okay. That's the link that you want to create. That way, that as transactions start to come in under that campaigns tool, we can track all of the transactions going towards that campaign. We can track our progress. We see that this form is linked to that campaign. So this is a step that you definitely do not want to overlook. It's really, really important. Okay, awesome. So let's say you go through all this and press save, then you're going to be directed to start creating your form. So for the sake of time, I did already create a form for us, and I want to take a look at it and work through some of the best practices that I think might help you when you're building out your own form. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and the first thing I'm going to do is stick under designer here. Okay, so first things first is keep it simple. Make sure you state your mission, state your purpose, state the impact of your donations, but simple enough to the point where you're not distracting donors. You also want to keep your language engaging, especially if you only have a little bit of space to work with. So let's look at this for a second. So give up with us. It's a risky title, I will say, but sometimes that works, right? If I were to see this and say, give up with us, what? Why would a nonprofit organization want me to give up with them? That's crazy. So even though it surprises people, right? And it might encourage them to look a little bit more into it. And then I say, ready to kick your bad habits? Support our Give Up With Us campaign by giving up one of your bad habits and donating what you would have spent on those habits to support children undergoing treatment at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Okay, so then next, stand in solidarity with children at CHOP who often have to give up things they enjoy during their treatment. So, like we talked about earlier, we were developing our strategy. This is where our purpose comes in. You might have been like, okay, Maggie, our purpose is obvious. Why are you making us reiterate this? And this is why, because it can really, really help when you start to launch your campaign and develop language around it. Here you can see the purpose. I know what this organization is trying to do as a donor. I know exactly how I can support it, and I know exactly where my money is going just by that one paragraph of information. And that's what you want. And then you also want to keep it engaging, right? Because a lot of times what we do in nonprofit can be really hard work, and we need funding for really, really serious reasons. And if we don't get funding, it has detrimental effects on actual human lives, which can be really, really heavy. It can encourage donors, but if there's too much heaviness, it can also discourage donors. So you need that balance. So that's why usually I try to add in something a little bit fun, right? So need some ideas of a habit to kick. Because someone might come in here and say, oh gosh, which habit do I don't know. I can't think of anything, right? And so that takes time away from their thinking. The longer they're sitting on this donation page, and you don't want that. You want people to kind of move through this a little bit quickly and get to their donation. So let's help them out and add some fun. So ideas of a habit to kick. How about that morning latte run or late night snacking? Chocolate lovers, we're looking at you. That would be me, by the way. Cocktail hour or beers with the boys, smoking breaks, that Saturday trip to Winners or Marshalls. I think for our Canadians, it's Winners. For US, it's Marshalls. I think you also have Marshalls in Canada. I'm from the US, so that's why, but yeah, you get the point. And another one, maybe ordering lunch. So get your meal prep on in the beginning of the week. So you can also see here, outside of the language I'm using, is we have a campaign progress bar. So this can be super encouraging. Just for donor psychology and human psychology, when you see that you can actually contribute to a bar moving up with your impact or your action, it can be super encouraging. I actually had a friend who ran a campaign the other day, and I was like, okay, I'll jump in there and donate $30. But I got in there and I was like, oh my gosh, she's like thousands of dollars away from her goal. Like, I better donate $100 to help her out. And I even know donor psychology and donation form psychology, and it still got me. That's how powerful it is. So a campaign bar is amazing. It's a great tool. Definitely use it. Another thing you want to do is provide different like frequencies or intervals as well as amounts, because as we know from donors, they like choice, right? Nobody likes to be forced into only one option, but you also don't want to have too many choices because, as we know, choices can overwhelm people and deter people. So try to find a balance. So for donation frequency, for example, I could do one time, weekly, quarterly, annually, but if I add all 4 options, somebody might just be like, oh my goodness, this is too much. So let me add 2 that make sense. One time, where I'm giving up something one time, Or maybe this is something I want to do annually moving into the new year is give up. So I'm going to make sure that, at the last 3 months of every year, I'm going to give up my coffee. And I know that that money is going to this particular organization. And of course, you have your amounts, which is pretty standard. And then also in other field in this case, right? Because everyone might have different amounts they spend on their habits. A dedication can be great as well. So this is who a donor wants to dedicate their donation to. And this can be great, especially like, for example, a hospital. They might know a child who's going through treatment, or they might, have a child in that hospital who's going through treatment, or it's a friend in that hospital, right? So this allows people to say, I want to support, but I'm really doing this because of this particular person. This is who inspired me to donate. And then I always recommend adding some fields to your donation form, not too many. Again, we want to keep it simple, but something that helps you collect information on your donors. This is super important because what this is going to allow you to do is in your follow-ups, it allows you to get personal. So for example, I could ask, well, what are you giving up? Tell us. We want to know. That's going to be awesome for my beneficiaries because I can take it back to the children undergoing treatment and say, we had 300 donors. Look at all the stuff they gave up. Like they're in solidarity, they're doing it with you. But then also when you're thanking donors, you can mention what they gave up, in your correspondence with them, which will make it personal and say like, oh, how's that going? We saw you kicked coffee. Like, tell us about that, which helps build the relationship. So you can think of a question that's related to your campaign, and then you can try to build that into almost like a stewardship activity. This leads right back into segmenting. The more information you have on donors, the more you're going to be able to target and personalize, which is like the key to donor stewardship and retaining donors. So keep that in mind. See if you can get creative about something you can add. Some other tips. We have branding. So keep your logos, images, and language consistent with your brand, right? That's always a big one. So people recognize you. And be creative with colors. So research has found that blue, green, and gray actually encourage people to donate. So feel free to throw some of those colors in. And then my last tip would be on the post submit page. So this is what people see after they donate. Make sure you put time into this. It can be really easy to go with the default, right? It's just like, oh, it's just a thank you. It's no big deal. But take time here. This is the first bit of recognition that a donor receives after they donate. So make it count, right? Okay. Last thing I want to show you is under settings. I just want to show you some of your sharing options, which some of you may already know. So you have your public link, great for campaigns. You can post this anywhere. You can post it on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, send it to your cousins and friends. So that's a great tip. QR code. So that means somebody can scan it anywhere. So if you want to go hang a flyer out there on the telephone pole with the QR code to donate, you can do that. An embed button if you wanted to embed it. And social sharing. So this is a big one for campaign. You're probably going to be sharing on socials. So if you turn this on, you can edit the description and the image that shows up when you post that public link on social media, like if you post it on Facebook, because you want it to look nice, right? Not just like a random link. You want to kind of add some fun to it. So that'll give you that option there. And then we have our standard settings as well, our receipt settings for when people submit transactions. If you want to auto tag any contacts, you can keep track of, who's donated to the campaign, so on and so forth. Pretty standard settings there. Okay, so to keep on time, I'm going to move forward. We're almost done. The last thing I want to show you is how you can track the progress of your campaign. So a few tools to keep in mind as you're tracking progress. The first place is form responses. Okay, so this is going to show you everyone who is contributing to this form in terms of contacts. If you want to look at transactions coming through this form, under the form, you can go to transactions and that'll show you the transactions that have come through. Another place you can see progress, as we looked at earlier, is under the actual campaign. So I'll click on one that's filled in a little bit, but you can start to see donations coming in, you can see the progress, and you can see the fundraising activity here as well. Another place we definitely want to look is where we started, which in the fundraising tool under summary, we have our donation goals. Ideally, we start to watch this go up along the way. And one last thing I want to show you in terms of tracking success is if I scroll down a little bit here on the summary tab, we have key performance indicators. Now, I know some organizations with Keela have never touched this. I know other organizations love this. In either case, this is going to be an amazing tool. I think it's one of our most underutilized tools, but it's definitely worth checking out. So what key performance indicators are is they're just metrics that track your success. Okay, so they're going to tell you how well you're doing in terms of fundraisers. So when we're thinking about KPIs, think about what the goal of your campaign was and think beyond just how much you want to raise. That's a very important goal. It guides the whole campaign, but think beyond that. So maybe with this campaign, we also want to attract new donors. We want to acquire new donors and build our list. Maybe we want to convert people for second gifts who have donated once. Maybe we want to see how our outreach is performing, right? So these are additional things that you can track that are not only going to show you how well you're doing now, but they're also going to guide later. Because if you find, okay, well, one of our goals was to get new donors during this campaign, but we didn't get any, right? Or maybe we thought our open rate was going to be really high and it's not. So what's wrong with our content? Where can we adjust? So they can help guide future strategies to make you more efficient. So if you go ahead and press add KPIs, I'll give you some examples. So let's say, okay, well, we want new donors also, right? That's a good one. Everybody wants new donors. So let's say I'm going to track our donor list size. So how many people in our contact base are donors? That's our donor list size. Maybe I want to look at our donor acquisition rate on a month-to-month basis. So how many new donors are we acquiring? Another thing we can look at, like I said, is second gift conversion rate. So how did this campaign encourage people to give for the second time? Let's look at that one too. And maybe I also want to look at some email marketing KPIs like our open rate or donor conversion rate. So the people who in my email click on a donate link and donate within the past 30 days. So you can click as many as you want, read them, play around. And when you press save, what you've built is a dashboard. So what this is going to show you here is sort of where you sit. You can compare yourself to benchmarks. So you can compare yourself to like other organizations at a similar cause area or size. You can look at where you sit currently, and you can even add a goal if you wanted to. So this can be super interesting to watch. I would recommend start with a couple of KPIs so you don't completely overwhelm yourself. The purpose of KPIs is to really like measure progress and analyze why you're hitting your targets or why you're not meeting your targets. So if you have too many, that type of analysis can start to feel really overwhelming. You'll lose the connection between the KPIs. The idea is to understand like where they correlate and why this is happening. So if you have 20 of them, you might get lost in there. So start with a few that feel like reflect your end of year giving campaign or what your campaign will contribute to, just to encourage you and alert you if you need to adjust your strategy at all. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking now and make room for any questions. So we'll kind of jump into Q&A. I don't know if any questions came in as I was chatting or if anybody wants to add them in the chat now, but the floor is all of ours.
While you were talking, we were all absolutely enraptured. So no questions came through.
Okay.
And I think you covered everything in such a, what is it called when you have the building blocks, such a foundational way. Every time you spoke, you kind of covered everything and then you moved on and it all kind of made sense. I feel like you left me with no questions whatsoever, and I don't see any coming through. It was very like, is it foundational, that kind of way of presenting where you sort of talk about one concept and then how that leads into another, and then you bring it all back to this first concept at the start?
Yeah, that tends to be how I do it, I guess naturally. No one's ever really pointed it out, but
Love it. Oh, we've got some questions.
yeah, I
Usually
see
you
them
got to
coming
give
in.
time people to formulate it, right? Okay, so we have a question from Mohammed first. The options you indicated, is it available only for premium members?
So Mohammed, it depends which options you are referring to. Everything that I presented in Keela itself in app is available. When we're talking about like premium members, we're talking about premium care. So that's where we can do that like one-on-one and sort of help you walk through this, build your fundraising campaign with you. We can even brainstorm ideas with you. That's more related to our premium care services. But in terms of the tools and app that I showed today, those are all available for all customers.
Yeah, and we actually recently launched a couple of different types of workshops, and I'll make sure I put details in this in the follow-up email. Workshops for premium care, where we've got with Premium Care, you get phone support, you get one-on-one training sessions, and you get kind of best practice seminars, which kind of are like webinars, but just one-on-one with you and your team. And then we've recently launched these workshops that Maggie's talking about. And the concept of them is that it would be as if Maggie was in your account with you saying, okay, so step one, let's look at creating a campaign. Talk to me about your campaigns. And then you would sort of talk to her about that and she would be able to give you advice. So it's sort of like it's kind of like a activity training plus an activity, plus at the end, you get something in your account to work from as well. And I think with Premium Care, you get access to one workshop or training session every month. So that's something you could work on and build on over time. Maybe you want to have a fundraising workshop this month to get it all set up. And then your next workshop could be picking up where that left off and looking at the results of it so far and analyzing that. So pretty cool stuff that we've just launched. I'm very proud of the customer care team for creating those new workshops, and we've got more to come as well. So if that's something you're interested in, please reach out to us. We can talk to you more about Premium Care. Okay, back to you, Maggie. I have another question for Kate. In the communications tab, what does the smart field, squiggly line, smart name mean? So what's the smart name, smart code?
Yeah, so any smart anything that you see in email marketing, we're pulling information from somewhere to help fill it in for you. So what the smart name does is rather than just saying full name or preferred name, the smart name allows you to, okay, Elsie, you'll have to remind me which order it goes in.
Absolutely, I can. So it looks
Okay.
at first it checks for preferred name. That's the first field it checks. And if that's blank, the Keela system will move down to first name. And if that's blank, we'll move down to full name. So it's really good if you've got if you're sending your email to a bunch of organizations and individuals at the same time, because it can be, often organizations might have a preferred name, which is the contact name, or you might have nothing and it's a full name. It's a way for you to kind of, it's more broad. I always recommend using smart name instead of any other smart code just to be safe and cover all your bases.
Thanks, Els.
No worries. I cannot help myself.
No, it's good. I like going back and forth. It's
I
fun.
love it.
We did have one more question too.
Yeah.
Where do
Ooh,
we find videos of previous sessions to learn more? From
absolutely.
Cassandra.
Okay. We have so many. If you go to our knowledge base, we have a section for training videos, and in that we have a section for Care Labs. So all of our webinars that we've ever held are in there. And the best part about that is that they open up directly in YouTube. And in YouTube, you can change the speed, which I find really useful. I find it really handy to watch videos and you can pause the video and replay it, but you can make it a bit faster. So you can put it as at 1.25 the speed. So everything kind of gets a little bit, you're kind of going through it a little bit, especially if it's a concept you're wanting to refresh. Oh, sorry. But we've barely looked at Keela yet. Where do we find that?
I just sent a link.
Oh,
We've sent it at the same, Cassandra and I typed at the same time.
I love that.
But yeah, once you get to that link, when you go on the knowledge base, just look for the big training videos box. But I also just sent the link to you as well. And you'll see we have different categories. So you can see like the best practice webinars, which is like what Elsie and I are doing now. That's the first one you'll see. But then we also have more like structured informative training videos on the tools that you can look at in there too.
Absolutely. And if you're in your Keela account, you can access the knowledge base just from there. So you don't sort of have to remember the URL or anything like that, because there's a little support button in the left-hand corner of your screen, and that's connected to our knowledge base. So if you click on that, you can type in there and you can search for anything in that knowledge base, and then it'll bring, you can click on the article and it'll open it up. So all you need to know forever is that support button in Keela. You don't need to remember it, I promise. Although if you did, I'd be very flattered. I'm very proud of our knowledge base. I had one question from Mohammed. Do Keela have options now for ACH and PayPal link and the PayPal for donation forms? So can we do ACH and PayPal at the same time on forms? And I'm talking already, so I may as well answer this.
Yeah, go ahead, Els.
I need to feel like I am necessary for this business, apparently.
Elsie needs to feel important. We're
I
gonna let her.
do.
We're gonna let
I
her
do
continue.
require that validation. So we do have ACH available. So for anybody else, this is things like bank transfers, bank payments, people making donations via their bank. We have it available on Keela Pay, which is our payment processor that we launched a couple of months ago. At the moment, Keela Pay is only available for USA customers, and it's being expanded to Canada. We're hoping to have that expanded within the upcoming months, but it does require a couple of things to fall into line. So once Keela Pay is available for all organizations, whether it's folks in Canada, folks in Australia, folks in New Zealand, once that's available, you'll be able to access ACH. So at the moment, not for Canadian customers because there's no Keela Pay for Canadian customers. But if you are a USA customer and you haven't already signed up for a Keela Pay, our payment processor, you definitely can do that, and then you can add that. And as a little thing to sweeten the deal, Keela Pay will also be introducing Google Pay and Apple Pay. So multiple payment options are going to be coming through for Keela Pay. So jump on board. Okay, I think so far we are great. Booyah, says Cassandra. Love that. Love that
Cassandra's
energy.
energy.
I know, it's amazing.
I know, it's
And
great.
I have to invite you to a webinar one day.
Can you imagine, Elsie? It's like a minute away from 11:30. That timing is beautiful.
I love that.
We nailed it.
Kismet. Thank you everyone for coming along. Remember that this is just one in a series of webinars about end of year, the most important one being receipting. If you're going to come to one of them, please come to my receipting webinar in December. I'm going to take you through the whole thing from start to finish. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Look forward to the recording soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Maggie. Bye.
Bye.